Welcome to the Bodhi Academy. My name is Shrutika and let us continue with the third part of our chapter 12, Reproduction in Plants. So in our previous two parts we have covered the sexual mode of reproduction and asexual mode of reproduction in plants. So today we shall cover the topic pollination in our third part of this chapter. So pollination is basically transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower, and this process is called as pollination. So in our previous class Welcome to the Bodhi Academy. My name is Shrutika and let us continue with the third part of our chapter 12, Reproduction in Plants. So in our previous classes we have studied about, in our part 1 and part 2 video, we have studied about the asexual mode of reproduction and the sexual mode of reproduction. In our today's class, let us see what is the meaning of pollination. So pollination is basically transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower, and this process is called as pollination. So from our previous class we know that anther consists of the male gamete and the stigma is the receiver of that male gamete in the female reproductive system. So now let us see how the pollination takes place in plants. So first type of pollination is self-pollination. So self-pollination. In self-pollination basically what happens is so first type of pollination is self-pollination. So self-pollination, if the pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower, it is called as self-pollination. So let me draw over here the stigma, that is stigma of the female reproductive part. So I am drawing the pistil which consists of the stigma, style and the ovary of the female reproductive system. So this is the flower which consists of the stigma, this is the style, and this is the ovary. Consider this as a single flower. These are the sepals. Then come the petals, these are the petals, and let me draw the male reproductive part, that is the stamen. Stamen consists of filament and the anther. So this is the style. So style consists of the anthers and the filament. So basically this is the male reproductive part, and stigma, style, ovary is the female reproductive part. So in self-pollination what happens is, in the same flower, self-pollination takes place in the same flower. So in self-pollination, the pollen grain, that is the male gamete, from the anther comes and settles on the stigma of the same flower. So this is the pollen grain from the same flower. So the flower is fertilized by its own male gamete, that is the pollen grain. So this pollen grain from the same, so pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower. So this is a flower which consists of the male gametes and the female gamete. So the male gamete, the pollen grain, settles on the stigma of the same flower, and then it will form the pollen tube, and then it will fertilize the flower. So this type of fertilization or this type of pollination, wherein the pollen grain of the same flower lands on the stigma of the same flower, is called as self-pollination. So this is one type of pollination, that is the self-pollination, wherein the pollen from the same flower will settle on the stigma of the same flower. Now let us see what is cross-pollination. So second type of pollination is called as cross-pollination. So in cross-pollination, again let us draw the structure of a flower. These are the sepals. Let me draw the petals. So consider this as a flower A. Okay, and then let me draw another flower. Consider this as flower B. So in cross pollination, basically what happens is the pollen of a flower lands on the stigma of another flower of the same plant or that of a different plant of the same kind. So this type of pollination happens in the same kind of plants, but the pollens from one flower of a same kind of flower will settle on the stigma of another flower but of the same kind. So what happens over here, this anther will not land on the same stigma and fertilize it. So what will happen is there will be pollination, wherein the pollen grains from these flowers will travel to the stigma. This is the stigma of flower B, and then it will settle on the stigma of flower B, and then it will fertilize and form the seeds in the fruit. So this type of pollination, wherein the pollen grains from one flower lands on the stigma of another flower. From flower 1, the pollen grains are pollinated and it is settling on flower B stigma. So this kind of pollination, wherein the pollens of one flower lands on the stigma of another flower of the same kind or that of a different plant but of the same kind. So the flowers has to be of same kind, but the anthers, the pollen grains from one flower will settle on the stigma of another flower. So this type of pollination is called as cross pollination. So this was about types of pollination. That is, first we have seen what is the meaning of pollination, that is transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the flower. Wherein we have seen self-pollination, wherein the pollen from the same flower lands on the stigma of the same flower. And cross-pollination, wherein a pollen from one flower will land on the stigma of the another flower. So these are the two modes of pollination, that is self-pollination and cross-pollination in flowers. Now let us see seed dispersal. So what is the meaning of seed dispersal? Seeds and fruits, seed dispersal as in after the seeds are formed, they are dispersed in our environment. So seeds and fruits of plants are carried away by wind, water and animals. So now let us see how the seed dispersal takes place. So we have seen that seed dispersal takes place by wind, water and animals. So for them to get dispersed through this medium, they have special structures. For example, here we can see seeds of drumstick and maple. So they are winged seeds, and here we can see hairy fruit of sunflower and hairy seed of mother. So these types of seeds, here they are having wings, and here it is very light and cottony substance. So they are very light and also they have wings. So these types of seeds are dispersed through air. So these types of seeds are dispersed by air. So second type, here we can see xanthium. Xanthium consists of a rough body. So this type of seeds, what happens once they are burst out from the fruit, these types of seed, as they have a rough surface body, they get attached to the fur of the animals or skin of the human beings, and this is how they are dispersed. So this type of seeds are dispersed by animals. So this is how, based on the structure of the seeds, they are dispersed according to their structure. They are dispersed by different mediums, that is water, wind and animals. If they are light, they are dispersed by wind. If they for example, coconut consists of the husk. This makes it have the ability to float in water. So coconut is dispersed through water. So this is how, based on their structure, they are dispersed by different mediums. So this was about seed dispersal. So in our today's class, we have learned about pollination, that is self-pollination, cross-pollination, and how seeds are dispersed according to their structure and the medium they are carried by. So thank you for watching today's video. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe.